Welcome to What CEOs Talk About. Do you wonder what CEOs talk about behind closed doors? How they bring their vision to reality? How do they overcome and succeed through adversity? We share that and so much more with each episode. Now, let's get started with the show.
Good day, everybody. My name is Martin Hutter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategies into frontline operations. Today, Kasey, the dangly earring. So if you've never looked at her LinkedIn profile, take a look and notice one key thing. At the exceptional of her bright eyes, her beautiful smile, and the way that she performs and she posts herself, you will notice one key. The earrings always change. So, Kasey, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Martin. I'm excited for this.
Thank you. Before we start, let's talk about our sponsor, Urgio, Integration Management Office. Kasey, have you been part of a merger, acquisition? Or do you know anybody who has?
Oh, I know lots of people who have, and I've done a lot of advising of clients while they are going through that. I just had a client acquire another business like 2 weeks ago.
So, in general, has it been a good experience or bad experience for most of them?
Well, it depends how you're measuring that. So it's usually a great experience for the person whose bank account is most directly affected. For the other people who work there, it tends to be a little more complicated and a little more frustrating.
And that is the key, right? When it is not managed properly, meaning when the purchasing, the scaling, the event, the transformation is not led, coached, really managed in an appropriate way, not by the people within the organization, but a third party that assists in the integration. I think that's critical. And that's what Urgio does best. If you want to have a good story, there's far too many times either you're selling your company and people are representing you in the sales, you'll get a much bigger multiple on that side. Same thing if you're scaling and you're looking for investors. Don't do the fund research all by yourself. Hire somebody else to do it, because you, as the technical component of your business, you know your business all too well to be able to be an expert in those specific fields to get the maximum value either of getting funded or selling or doing a merger and acquisition. There's better things for you to spend your time on to be able to be either growing the company or profitable. So thank you, Kasey. So for that, thank you very much, Urgio, for sponsoring this episode with Kasey Jones. Thank you. With that being said, what is the title of the show, Kasey?
Get your shit together.
What? Okay. I love it. So before we unwrap getting your shit together, can you tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about yourself? Give us the story. Where are you from? Where are you born? Kind of walk us through who you are, because I think it's important for a lot of people. How you were brought up kind of defines who you are today. So without divulging too much, just give us a flavor for what's your journey since you were born to where you are today?
That's quite a question. So, I was most of my childhood I spent in New York, about an hour outside of New York City, a small town called Bedford in Westchester County, which a lot of people have heard of. I definitely grew up with a lot of privilege. My father was very hardworking, very successful. I barely saw him the vast majority of my childhood. So he worked for Reader's Digest. Remember Reader's Digest?
Oh my goodness, I do.
Yeah, he worked for Reader's Digest when I was a kid on the finance side. And then when I was 11, we moved to Miami because he went and became the CFO of Knight Ridder, which doesn't exist anymore, but used to be the second largest newspaper publishing company in America. And so they owned the Miami Herald, they owned San Jose Mercury News, they owned, I think, about 30 other newspapers. And we spent 5 years in Miami, which I didn't, coming from a small, kind of conservative, very rural town in New York. Literally, our next door neighbor when I was a kid was an 88-acre steer farm. And then we moved to Miami. And I went from being a very sheltered little kid to not. Struggle that I didn't struggle. I just didn't like it. I didn't like school in Miami. So went to school there for middle school and my freshman year. Then I went to boarding school my sophomore year. My choice. For those of you that aren't familiar with boarding school, I wasn't in trouble. My school, actually, the year I went was harder to get into than Harvard. But then while I was there, my parents, Knight Ridder, decided they knew that the newspaper business was dying. And so they tried to become more technologically advanced. So Knight Ridder moved their headquarters from Miami to San Jose. And so we moved to California, and like a ding dong, I was like, oh, maybe I should go to school in California. And I switched schools again. So I went to 3 high schools in 3 states in 3 years.
Oh my.
And it was a very, very hard transition being the new kid with a bunch of kids that had been in school together since kindergarten. It was rough, very rough. And we were there for a couple years. And then I took a year off between high school and college. I'm old enough that was not a gap year. That was a, oh my God, you really fucked up year. And your parents are very, very angry at you. Took a year off. My parents, I mean, we're really revealing some stuff here. My parents, I was a little bit of a hellion. And so my parents kicked me out of the house thinking that I would come back crawling on my hands and knees. And instead, this is 2000. Instead, I'd had 2 months experience as a receptionist at a real estate agency, and I'd gotten fired. And I got a job as an administrative assistant to 2 vice presidents at Nortel Networks. And my parents very quickly were like, well, that didn't work. Damn it.
That backfired. Oh my God. Hearing your story, I mean, having the fortitude and that's the mental fortitude from going from 3 different high schools. Now, everybody knows changing high schools or changing your kids' high schools is something that is traumatic in the building of social fabric of the individual. Yeah. And you chose to go out by yourself, and then you chose again to go out. That just shows the character that you have. You're an iron lady inside. Good for you. And then you got kicked out and you're like, piss off. I can handle this by myself. I can do it.
Yep. Yes, it was quite the experience. And yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I have a very good relationship with my parents now, but my parents they treated me like an adult when I was a very little kid. And so I was very like on my own from a really early age. And yes, I was very privileged. I went to amazing schools. I lived in nice houses, but I was very solitary and I was very independent. And I think there's a lot of really good things that came from that, but there's also some not good things that came from that. But when you talk about internal fortitude, yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that has probably defined me in my childhood, but especially my adult years, it's being gritty.
It's funny. Now you tell me the story every time. Like I follow everybody. I do my time of actually. A lot of people go to social media and they go, "Oh, I don't want to spend time on social media. I'll post, and just get the hell out of it." How are you actually leveraging your connections if you're not taking the time to really read through what some people do? And I have found that in all of your pictures and the text that you put together, the one thing that I've noticed, I'm dyslexic, so for me, texts and words, images are worth 1,000 words for me. There is always that very calm yet peaceful look in your pictures. And I that kind of defines you. Now I know where that comes from, is because you've been through, you are calm and solitary and yet very strong in your position and who you are. And I think that it brings us to the, well, not just yet. Let's not reveal the get your shit together, because I think it's climactic. It's getting there.
Yeah. Well, and look, it's and I could tell you a few more things about it, but the most common thing I hear, particularly from people that are older than I am, I'm like, what, 6 weeks from my 40th birthday, but people will always say, and they have for years, oh, you're wise beyond your years. And I think it's interesting. That's what happens when you have been through some shit and you found ways to not only survive, but learn from those experiences and grow from them. You develop a sense of calmness and also empathy for others. So yes. So, okay. So then I went to college. I went to Reed College. A lot of people don't know Reed. It's a very, very small school here in Portland, Oregon. I think it's only like 1,300 kids, so the same size as my high school. Very nerdy, where you basically write a master's thesis as an undergrad. Reed is most notable for really rigorous kind of academics and schooling and a lot of drug use. That's kind of what it's known for.
Let's stay in the brain, psychedelics, and very theoretical concepts. Oh,
totally. Like
goodness.
Reed has a nuclear reactor on campus, but Reed also, It's one of the only privately owned nuclear reactors like in the country. And it also, my freshman year, Rolling Stone, so Reed throws a party at the end of the year called Ren Fair. And no, it's not a Renaissance fair. It's just a crazy ass party. And Rolling Stone ranked it the third best party in the country after Burning Man and Mardi Gras when I was a freshman. And so it's like, it's unreal. It's unreal. And you can't believe that a school allows this to happen, but they do. And it's freaking wild. And it's the celebration.
Work hard, play hard, right?
Yep. And so all the seniors turn in their thesis, and then the party starts. And what's cool is it's a full thesis. I mean, I wrote a 130-page thesis with my own research. I had to defend it for 2 hours in front of 6 members of the faculty. I mean, it's legit, and it was a really amazing experience for me. I graduated having no freaking clue, like, what a person could do for a living, like, let alone what I wanted to do, because all theoretical. It's all intellectualism. It's not like real life stuff. So I didn't know what to do. And I didn't even know how a person could find a job. And again, my parents weren't super helpful. So what did I do? I went into sales because I saw a job ad being like, can you talk to people? Here you go. Here you go. So I sold.
Yeah, I can talk to people.
Yeah. And I had no clue. So I did sales for a while. And then made the transition to tech, and I led a team of sales development reps. And it was while I was there that I then made the transition to marketing, and have been in marketing for the last decade. Every role pretty much in marketing, but my specialty is really stuff that drives revenue. So mostly early stage demand gen. And I would say my secret is the fact that I have no real marketing training. And so I just figure out how to do stuff instead of looking at things and saying, well, this is how it is supposed to be done. Which is usually how you get yourself into trouble, I think.
Well, there's a difference between having direction and following procedures. Yeah. And that's what I always tell people when we work with them. People tend to say, what are the guidelines? I tend to say, what's the center line? And there's a big debate within my company, which, my partners are well experienced. They've got years of entrepreneurial experience. We've got years of enterprise level experience as well. And they go, well, let's use some guidelines. I said, no, forget it. Use the center line, attach yourself. And I think that comes from my military background of saying, here's the objective. Make sure you get the objective. Here's a whole bunch of tools. Here's a whole bunch of knowledge. Here's how you should do it. Here's an example. Use all the skills, adapt and overcome. And that is the Ranger, the Ranger way of doing things. And so I think that that's the business mindset that you've got, is to say, okay, what needs to be achieved, right? Yeah. Marketing, people think that it's a whole bunch of process. It's simple. How do you get eyes on your products or product? And how do you create a binary decision that's saying, I need this product for my life?
Yeah.
That's as simple as that.
It is.
So,
and we do try to overcomplicate things. By the way, I was just smirking because you just revealed something to me. So previously you used a term, a phrase that my father is one of the only people I've ever heard use the phrase internal fortitude. And my father was a Green Beret. And so you just revealed why you two have that thing in common, and you used it before. And I was like, oh, that's interesting that he used that phrase. Like, I don't hear people say that very often. Now I understand.
Oh, it scares me as I raise my children. Yeah. And for other children's as well. I don't want to be hard on my kids. That's not the point. I don't want to be soft with my kids as well. You are who you are because of the adversity that you've seen in life.
Yes.
Right? And
how you deal with it. And I think that's correct. That's something that I am very, very passionate about is, you always have a choice. You always have a choice in how you view the things that happen to you. You can view yourself as a victim. You can view that experience as, something awful, an unfairness, a travesty, or as a lesson to be learned, a blessing. And there are certain things in my life that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, but I genuinely view as blessings because of what they taught me and because of how I took those experiences and was able to learn from them and grow and change as a person.
And I think this is where we insert, get your shit together.
Get your shit together. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Why did you choose that title?
Well, let's get into it. So I had an experience, almost 2 years ago, probably by the time this episode goes live, it'll be 2 years ago, that completely changed me as a person. So June 10th, 2020, and we don't need to get into all the details, and trigger warning for anybody listening. This is not a fun story. So I was attacked by a dog.
Why?
And not like I got bit by a dog. Like, no, like I was mauled, and I was absolutely 100% certain that I was going to die, and I didn't. We don't have to get into all the details, but my neighbors heard my screams for help. They came and saved me, and this is after I fought like hell for a while first. I spent several days in the hospital. I had pretty extensive surgery to kind of repair the damage. Let's see. You can see. Well, no, I guess you can't. You can see some of the scars here.
Oh, yeah.
And it wound up teaching me a lot about myself, about what I cared about in life, what mattered to me. But the other thing that was a really, really powerful lesson for me is when I had the time and the space and the permission to deal with my shit, to try to heal from what I'd just gone through, what I realized is that what was hard about it wasn't actually processing the thing that had just happened. It was that a ton of other stuff that I hadn't really dealt with came up too. And I started to realize that a lot of the things that had been kind of holding me back in my business and in my career were the remnants of, I'd been in a really toxic and dysfunctional marriage to a pretty controlling man, and I hadn't really dealt with that, my divorce and all the fallout from that. I'd had a business partnership that had completely imploded and was just a horrible experience. And I hadn't really dealt with any of that either. And something that I learned, if you bear with me while I sort of explain this, there's actually 2 classifications of trauma. And there's capital T trauma. They call it big T trauma. And that's what we think of. It's war. It's attacks. It's life and death stuff. Mm-hmm. And then there's little t trauma, lowercase t trauma. And that's like being neglected as a kid, being bullied as a kid, having chronic health issues, being in a toxic work environment, having infertility problems, being in a bad marriage. Like, it's the stuff that is less acute. It's the things that we think, no, I just soldier on and I, stiff upper lip and I get through it. But the problem is we convince ourselves that we don't need to deal with it in the same way that we would like a life or death situation. But truly, even neurologically, it has the same impact on our brain, on our behavior, on our nervous system, on our body, that a capital T trauma does. But most of us think that we're being strong and tough and having internal fortitude by just toughing our way through it. And we do ourselves a disservice by not giving ourselves the time and the space to grieve and to mourn and to let ourselves, feel our feelings in all of these tough ways.
I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been quiet and silent.
I did notice.
That's your superpower is your kryptonite as well, right?
100%. 100%.
Wow. That just speaks volume in regards to who I am. When I came back from Bosnia, I buried children. And when I came back, 14 kids actually. So you bury children. We came back, and PTSD back then was like, suck it up, buttercup. And it took me 10 years to get over it. You're absolutely right. So what was the impact, and how did you deal with it? So big trauma, little trauma. So you had a big trauma, and then all of a sudden you realized you had a whole bunch of little traumas. What was your journey? How did you come? So I'm assuming, and I'm sorry for assuming, but you're in bed, you're in the hospital, you've kind of living this trauma, and you're going, shit, it's not just that, it's this and that and this and that. When did you come to that realization?
It took longer than that. And I will say, so the attack happened on a Wednesday. They couldn't operate on Wednesday because I'd eaten right beforehand. So they had to operate on Thursday. And so I got out of surgery Thursday. I'm kind of recovering from surgery. My boyfriend, my partner, left the hospital for the night, and because I was falling asleep and I fell asleep, and in the hospital they're constantly coming in your room. So I wake up at like 1:00 in the morning to the nurse kind of checking on me, and then I could not go back to sleep because I couldn't stop crying. And that was the first time where I was like, oh God, like this is really not good. And I remember thinking I just knew that what I wanted to do was not talk to anybody and not tell anybody what was going on. And I knew that every single day that I waited to talk about it, it would become exponentially harder for me to talk to anyone. And so, and, you know, my arms were completely bandaged. My hands were bandaged. I couldn't, you know, text on my phone or anything like that. And so I sent a voice message to my therapist at like 4:00 in the morning, telling him what had happened and saying I really needed help. And I reached out to some friends, and I actually posted on social media saying what had happened, because I knew that if I did that, my friends would see it without me having to reach out specifically to them, and that would help me. And it was one of the best things I did. And I felt crazy doing it, but it was one of the absolute best things that I did. And it was, so for probably the next 4 months, I think I was in therapy twice a week. And it was probably like a month or two in, when I wasn't in crisis mode about the attack and the aftermath of it and all of that, when I started to realize like I was just, all of this stuff was coming up. And I'll be real. I mean, I've made huge progress. I'm still unpacking some of it. I'm still peeling back layers. I think that's the thing that's sort of fascinating about when you go on a healing journey. It's sort of in ebbs and flows. You will suddenly feel like you're making this progress, and then it'll sort of ease up, or things will become easier, and you're like, okay, I'm good. And then something comes up, or you have an aha, or you realize something, and you go a layer deeper. And so it's been this ongoing process. But I think, you know, you said something, you asked, so what was your journey? And one of the things that I've really learned, you often want to learn about what someone else's journey is so that you know what yours should be like going through something similar. And it turns out like we are all just incredibly complex humans. We are all beautiful snowflakes, and your journey is going to be yours and yours alone. And it's always going to be changing and shifting. And something that's kind of powerful about it is sort of learning to keep paddling, but also ride the waves as they come.
I always say, today is yesterday for tomorrow.
Yep.
So if you think about that for a sec, right? So today is yesterday for tomorrow. We always tend to live in the past or live in the future. I'm going to do this tomorrow. Your past is dictated by the actions that you do right now. So I think the journey too often, first of all, thank you for sharing, because I think that sharing this information is critical for a lot of people. The journey is a journey, and that's the key thing. There's trigger events that happen that we say, oh yeah, whatever. And if you visualize a small scratch on your shin, oh, I tore my leg on a twig, and then another one, and then another one. If you don't take care of them, they could pus up, they could fester, and then your journey's over because you have to have an amputation. I'm going to extremes, but that's the kind of the visual aspect of mending or tending to those. And the journey is hard work, but without rest. I always say prosperity is key. And so prosperity is the equation or the result of profit plus sustainability. We work from Monday to Friday to be able to sustain that continuously. And so we work Monday to Friday so that we can do the things that we love to do on Saturday, Sunday, outside of work. And we repeat that cycle over and over and over again. So I think that what you've identified is that in this mental fortitude, I'm glad I said that and you identify that, because now I'm going to be cautious, because it's pointing in the wrong direction. It's giving wrong advice. It's telling, it's saying, it's pointing to the result without having context. And that, I think, is debilitating for what I've just said. Now, you can demonstrate mental fortitude, but don't take my words as you should have mental fortitude. I think there's fortitude is to embrace your events in your life as well. And I think that's the context that I see in you now that you've told the story. Is I've gone through some shit.
I don't doubt
and no, that's what I see in you.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying is like, wow, I've gone through some shit. And no matter how strong you think I am, I am still vulnerable.
And here's the deal. Like, I think I appreciate you saying that about that, that phrase. And I think here's the deal. I think what makes us stronger is allowing ourselves to feel those emotions. And the problem is that we've been taught that vulnerability is weakness, but it's not. The most courageous people we know are the ones that own up to the vulnerability, that face the vulnerability, that share it with the world, right? It's always really interesting. I talk with a lot of people about, because I'm and I'm not a big one, but I'm a content creator on several social media platforms. And when I talk to people about that process, they'll be like, well, I don't really want to talk about personal things because I think people will judge me as weak if I talk about hard things I've gone through. And I'll be like, okay, I get that. Say, okay, think about a couple of the thought leaders that you follow or that you admire, people that share their story with the world. They'll say, okay. I'll say, do you have a couple in mind? Yeah, I do. Do they share personal trials that they've been through? Oh, yeah. Do you think they're weak when they do it? And there's always this long pause, and they're like, no, I think they're so brave. And so I think there's something we really are so afraid of opening up in that way, of sharing ourselves, because we're so worried about judgment. But truly, every time I've done it, the response is so overwhelmingly supportive, so incredibly kind, and sometimes it's people just coming out and supporting. I mean, truly, it was astounding after what I went through, the way people supported me. It could not have predicted it. It was incredible. But it was also lots of people that said, oh, thank you. I went through this and I was too afraid to talk about it. Or, my friend or my kid is going through something similar, and this is really helpful for them to know that they're not alone. And so there's something, it's terrifying to put ourselves out there in that way. And I'm not saying you even have to do that, but truly, like, the most helpful thing was to start talking about it and talk about it a ton. Yes, with my therapist. Yes, with friends. And in a bunch of other ways. And there's something incredibly healing when we get it out of our own brain and heart and soul and kind of share it with the world.
There's two things I want to talk about. First one is people see social media as the evil of evils right now.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent.
Yeah.
When you look at the foundational, why was social media created? And you go social, so interaction between sharing, media. How cool was it when Facebook started for me and saying, I can't remember the guys and girls that I went to high school with. Wonder what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then you went ticky-tack, 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 and you went, holy shit. You look old just like me. I remember you from your yearbook, right? You've changed. And you're like, shit, yeah. And then I go, oh, she was my first girlfriend. I wonder what she's doing. And then ticky-tack, ticky-tack. And you go, Bridget, wow, you got 3 kids. Wow, you're still hot. Wow. like all these things that social media brought to us. Now, people took advantage of it, and I think there's extremes to it. But social media is a platform for you to do storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think that is critical. There's too many people that use it for, and this is what I have a hard time with my marketing team. Oh, it's all about numbers. This is this. Well, if everybody's thinking like you, is anybody reading this shit? Right? So do I think that, like television, I think television is a wonderful tool to switch your brain off. Yep. I'm dyslexic. I cannot read to save my life. I cannot. Do you know how many BBC and National Geographic videos and shows I've watched? I know more about a bearded baboon than most people do because I've watched it. So TV is a good place in a certain amount. Yeah. So that's number one. So social media, I wanted to bring it back to what Miss or Mrs. Jones? Miss Jones. That's such a powerful name, Miss Jones. It's just very commanding.
Well, that's one of the things I learned from my divorce is to never, ever, ever change my name again. I was a Tonsfeld for a while. Like, good Lord.
What?
You know, yeah. I mean, like, no, like my name is freaking Kasey Jones. Why would I ever give that up? And so it was a very helpful thing for me to be like, no, I will never give up Jones ever again.
Indiana Jones. Yeah. I mean, it is a powerful name.
A powerful freaking name. Yeah.
I agree. So Miss Jones, what Miss Jones said about her story is use social media for what you think is right. Yeah. I think if you've got a righteous mentality, use social media to tell your story. Don't overthink it. Don't overmarket. I think that's what you say, I'm sure, to all of your clients is just be truthful and honest. Be transparent, right? Yeah. That's the first thing that I really wanted to say. Yeah. The second thing is fear. When we bury fear, we keep that fear with us. Yep. It's always attached. So one thing that I did a long time before, and we do it in the military, so situation, mission, execution, you follow the process of what's the objective. Tim Ferriss took it another level. He calls it fear setting from Stoicism. Is to say, what can go wrong? What is the risk management? How will you manage risk in your life? What are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that my wife is going to leave me. Okay, so why are you afraid? Well, I don't spend enough time with her. So, okay, smart the fuck up then. Spend more time with her. Like, it's not rocket science to say, what are you afraid of? What's the impact? What's the probability? Do risk assessment on the situation and fucking fix it. Pardon my French.
Well, let's be real. We've been dropping the F-bombs the whole time. I'm usually the first one. But so here's the other thing that I love about kind of personal branding and social media. So when you put yourself out there on social, and in any way, even if it's not social media, if, let's say you want to start a newsletter, you want to write, a couple of amazing things happen. One, you start to figure out what the heck you want to talk about. What message do you feel called to kind of deliver to the world? And that is it's a process, and you're always the more consistent you are and the longer you do it, again, you're peeling back layers of you will discover
get your shit together
about yourself. Yes. But here's the other thing. It's pretty much always scary. Okay? It's always the moment before you hit that like submit button, you always have that moment of like, oh God. It's always kind of terrifying. And then you put it out there and you realize, okay, that really wasn't that bad. That wasn't scary. I actually got some good feedback on that. Like I connected with someone. And so it's basically this process of one, figuring out what matters to you. What do I stand for? What do I want to be known for? And then facing your fear on that every freaking day. And so it does make you so much more courageous. I've gotten to know a lot of content creators over the last few years. All of them deal with imposter syndrome, self-doubt, a million other things. They're just like every other freaking human. But they're also kind of badass because they face those fears every single freaking day. And that leads to this level of courage that is hard to explain and is incredibly valuable in every other part of your life.
drop the mic.
And that, like, it's why I'm so passionate about it. It's why I'm such a huge advocate for, you know what, you kind of feel like you want to start the podcast, start the fucking podcast. Mm-hmm. Kind of want to feel like you want to start posting on one, social media channel or the other, or start that newsletter or start that blog. Freaking do it. But commit to doing it consistently, because guess what? You're going to totally suck at it at first. And that you got to suck at something first before you're going to get good at it. So just know it. But it's also, P.S., it's okay to suck at it at first because no one's going to see it.
Well, the whole 12 listeners you got.
Like no one, like it's great. Like you can work out the kinks when no one's really paying attention. And you will build that audience over time while you improve your skills. And it's such a cool journey. It's a tough one. I know it's a tough one, but it is so incredibly rewarding. And the people you meet along the way, right? This is why I love podcasting.
It is. For those who are listening or watching, I hope that you're getting the foundational underlying of get your shit together in everything that Miss Jones is saying. This is without her saying it, it's like, okay, be courageous, be compassionate, be kind, first to yourself.
Yes.
Number one, so get your shit together. Stop thinking that you deserve less than somebody else. Stop thinking that you are above or below, because there's the opposite syndrome as well. Get your shit together. Some people think that they think that their shit don't stink. And so, sorry to say, but man, oh man, everybody's poops from the same hole and everybody spreads their peanut butter on their toast the same way that I do and Mrs. Jones does. So there is no man and woman above or below you. So get off your high horse and be courageous enough to accept that normal is okay.
Here's the thing. This is sort of the, I don't know, is it the paradox of get your shit together? I think part of maybe the first step is unpack your shit.
Ooh.
Because what I've learned from myself, and I've now, once I saw it in myself, I started to see it in all my clients, where the stuff that was holding them back in their business was not tactics, it wasn't strategy, it wasn't connections, it wasn't money. All of those things affect your success, it affects your business, but they're all solvable problems. Mm-hmm. The shit that is actually holding you back is your stuff that you haven't processed and you haven't figured out. So I'll give you some examples. I had a call with a potential client. We decided to not work together. This was a couple months ago, and we were having this whole conversation. He's a technical founder. And we were talking about growth and all these things, and I was asking a lot of questions about like what he had been doing. And he was like, well, no, I really haven't done any sales. I just keep thinking that if I can make the product better, it's just going to sell itself. And, I asked a few follow-up questions and it was really obvious. And he admitted to it. He was like, no, I'm absolutely terrified of sales. The whole idea of it is really scary to me. It does not come naturally to me. I know I'll be horrible at it. I just cannot do it. And it was like, and it's things like that. And so for me, it was stuff where I was too likely to trust the wrong people, and I did not listen to my gut when red flags mm-hmm. popped up, because I would think, well, you know what, maybe I'm being difficult, or maybe, mm-hmm. I'll just trust that it'll work out. And then it really, mm-hmm. really wouldn't, and it would totally blow up in my face. And I knew it, but it was, I struggled to listen to myself and listen to my own instincts. Or, I started as a marketing consultant, and really quickly everyone was like, if you want to grow, if you want to scale, you got to build an agency. And I was like, okay. And so I built an agency, and then I realized I really, really hated running an agency. And I also kind of sucked at it. Like I was not like, you have to be a damn good project manager. And that is not my strong suit. And I was doing everything that I hated doing as an in-house marketer, right? Doing the same thing every single day for long periods of time. I was getting so bored. It was because, again, I did not trust my instincts. I didn't trust myself. I didn't pursue my vision. And it's things like this that, you know, it comes up in almost every client relationship I have where there's something personal that they haven't really dealt with, they haven't really figured out on their own, and it's bleeding into how they build and run their business in a not good way.
I agree wholeheartedly, and that's one of the reasons why I ask you up front, hey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? The starting years, how somebody is raised, where they're raised, how they operate, defines the human being. So people tend, I make it very... Now I'm telling my secrets. I make it very casual to understand the people that I'm working with because there's something in their lives that defines who they are. The fact that I'm problem solving all the time is the fact that I grew up with not a lot. And then, you know, scarcity breeds creativity. So how do I solve problems? I hate waste.
Yeah.
But still to this day, I will eat something that is detrimental to my health instead of throwing it in the garbage.
Yeah.
Just drives me absolutely nuts. I was like, oh, there's a piece of chocolate there. And then Chase will go throw it in the garbage. But it's wasteful. So, holy shit, Martin. It is worse for you to eat that piece of chocolate than to throw it away.
Yep.
And then I get upset with my kids who don't finish their plate. I grew up, you eat everything on your plate. The fat, the only thing that you're allowed to leave is the bones, and then the bones go to the dogs.
Yep.
And so... Again, my superpower is my kryptonite. As much as that's what I do. I provide direction. I eliminate waste. I create automation for liberation. Then it becomes your kryptonite. I go, oh shit, why am I plump? Why am I pudgy? Because you keep putting shit in your mouth, man, that you shouldn't. Like, it's, again, there I'm exaggerating as well because I am not plump or pudgy. Am I a little bit overweight? Yes. Why am I not kind to myself? Right? Then you get into rhetoric, right? You see, and nobody's perfect. So,
but learning this stuff about ourselves is really helpful. And so it is really interesting. It's like, I think that the greatest superpower we can have in life in general, but especially in entrepreneurship, is self-awareness. Mm-hmm. But we're not really taught how to be self-aware. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of work to just regularly be sort of unpacking why you do the things you do, where it comes from, what does it mean? And so I think one of the first, my boyfriend and I, we've been together, 6 years now, and we met on a dating app. And I think one of the very first things he said to me, it wasn't the first, but it was probably like 5 messages in. I think he said something, he complimented me in some way, and I responded being incredibly self-deprecating. And he said, okay, so you clearly cannot take a compliment. Noted. And like we still joke about it because, I was raised with like kind of absentee parents, but parents who are how I describe them: high praise, high criticism.
Mm-hmm. A CFO.
Oh yeah. And my dad, like he's less bad about it. My dad is much, and especially as he's gotten older, the Green Beret who was like really, really serious when I was a kid, he's cries at literally everything now, like everything. Yeah. Everything. And it's adorable. And he's like the cutest man. And people are like, how is he a Green Beret? He wears like little bow ties. He's the cutest. But my mother especially was like tough as nails. And she grew up really in a really, really, dysfunctional family. And so she was just super, super tough and like hyper critical because she thought if she could teach us, she could be the first to let us know all the ways someone else was going to make fun of us. We would fix it so that we wouldn't have to experience that, which turns out it's not really how we absorbed it. It was just like, mom's really mean. But so hyper self-critical. You know, I was taught very much like it's all about kind of image and the image that you project. And so it took a really long time for me to realize that I was making decisions based on what I thought would please or impress others, and not on what I actually wanted. And it really wasn't until I got out of my marriage that I realized, I mean, I got out of my marriage and I was like, I had no idea who the heck I was. I was like, I had no hobbies. I had very few friends. He was a bigger than life, very kind of controlling, domineering, mildly narcissistic human. And so he filled up a room. And so I just receded. And it took time for me to be like, okay, I got to figure out what do I want? Like, what
get your shit together.
Yeah. Like, get my shit together. And I think this is the thing that's just interesting is that process of getting your shit together. It never ends. You're always figuring out that next phase and there's, you know, get your shit together sounds really harsh and kind of negative, but it can be actually kind of a amazing, beautiful process of you just always learning a little bit more about yourself, always finding a new way to just grow a little bit.
Getting your shit together is a call to action more than anything else. Yeah. And your call to action is to spend time. Too many times we don't spend time with ourselves. I took up journaling a long time ago, and it's more of a common thing, but really get your papers together. Talk to yourself in the third person. Be not necessarily critical, but be insightful, curious about your life. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing when you're doing it? And I think that for me, there's two tools that I want to leave people with in here because Kasey, you said something about building a company and building a practice. Everybody says, oh, you know, to be successful, you have to have a company. Well, no, to be successful is to feel comfortable in what you're doing, loving what you do. That for me is success. And, you know, people are very successful at mechanics. You know, when you look back 50 years, people are very successful at being a baker. You know, you look at French people from France, they're third generation boulanger, which they make bread. That's all they do. But they're so good at it. They're so committed to their trade that they feel enthused. They love the work that they do. So don't feel the need. Correct. Don't associate money with being successful. Too many young people now feel that they need to go into it. So there is nothing wrong in having a practice. So whatever fits best. There's nothing wrong in being an employee. We say, oh, entrepreneur is this, entrepreneur is that. Well, there's nothing wrong if you are risk adverse and you like the safety of a job and that's what you feel comfortable in. There's nothing wrong in being a worker bee. Nothing wrong with that. So I want to make sure that the people who are listening, if you're not a CEO, if you're not an entrepreneur, it's okay.
And it's okay. I want to push back on the worker bee. Just because you're an employee doesn't mean you are a worker bee. You can be that strategic person. You can be an intrapreneur. And so
true. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You can take those elements, but still have that security and that stability.
One of the other things that from what you said before that really caught my eyes that I do frequently is if you're the founder, where do you fit? And if you don't have, we always hire, evaluate, perform it with PASKey. Profile, attitude, skill, experience, energy, and time. So if you're a very short-sighted individual, time-wise, then you can't be the CEO because you can't be strategic. You're only tactical. If your profile, you're a quick start and you have to go into details, you're not the right fit. If you have the attitude of a visionary and you have to have the attitude of kind of get shit done individual, then you're not the right person. Yep. If you don't have the skills of accounting, then you can't be the president. So quickly identifying where you add value according to PASKey is critical to your success. So getting your shit in order to liberate time for you to learn those special skills, experience, and knowledge that you do is critical. Because if you add more stuff to an existing cup, which is already full, like you said before, like getting your shit together, if you don't empty the cup to be able to make room for all these extra skills that you need, at a certain point, your EQ and your anxieties is just going to go through the roof.
And if you aren't in a position where you can have that level of self-awareness and get your ego out of the way to do what needs to be done for your business, you will sink your own ship. And I've seen this multiple times as well, where it's a founder who they are too tied to the self-identity of being the CEO. Mm-hmm. And so even though they might kind of know that they aren't the best fit, that there are certain situations that are holding themselves back, they can't get out of their own way, or they're completely uncoachable. And so they can't go get a coach that can help them level up in certain skills or certain areas so that they can be the CEO that their business needs. And this is one of the hardest parts, I think, of being human, is when you are really pushing back on someone's feedback. Can you take a moment and say, is my defensiveness coming from a place of thoughtfulness and genuine reflection, or is it coming from my ego?
Oh, we can spend hours on this. Yeah. No matter how shitty. So first of all, the engine feedback, you don't say positive, negative feedback. You say, can I offer some guidance or can I give you some success feedback? And anybody that gives me feedback are actually taking the time to tell me something. Even if it's shitty, it's somebody who's taking the time to actually tell me something. So there is something rooted in it. Now, do I apply it? Do I take it in consideration? Do I mull over it? Absolutely. You should always listen and take it as a gift. No matter how stinky you think it is, maybe you use it for fertilizer, right? Poop is good for fertilizer.
And even if you realize it's actually not great advice for you, they've just told you something incredibly important about how they view you and about your relationship with them. And that might be where the gift truly is.
Agreed. 100%. 100%. Last question.
Yeah.
What piece of reference do you always go back to? It could be a book, it could be a movie, it could be somebody said something. What's the one piece of that you always go back to?
It's literally sitting on my desk because I'm writing a series of Twitter threads breaking down the entire framework. But it is the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And as someone who is, and by the way, I've learned that this is part of my own trauma response to other things in my past. I'm addicted to busyness. Mm-hmm. And I am addicted to busyness in a way that does not help me. It does not help my life. It does not help my business. Like it's a challenge. It's a really, really big challenge for me. And so I am constantly going back to this book, Essentialism, and I'm constantly recommending it, although there's one other that I need to mention because it's a client brought it up with me. But Essentialism is really about how you figure out what really matters and getting all the other shit out of the way. Mm-hmm. The other one, which I think is it's a very simple book, but I've had a few clients that I've recommended reading this book that bring it up freaking every call that we have, and I had one of those conversations today, is the book Who Not How. And the whole idea is that when you need to do something new in your business, you need to solve a new problem. Our instinct, especially for those of us that are like scrappy, get shit done kind of people, we're like, okay, let's figure out how we're going to do it. No. Figure out who is going to do it. Find the person who it's their skill set. They've either done it before, they know how to do it, or it really matches the way their brain works and their skills. So they're going to figure it out 10 times better than you would, and they're going to make the results of it significantly bigger than you would have even been able to imagine.
And what is that book again? Who,
Not How. And it's by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is the founder and CEO of Strategic Coach. And it's a big executive coaching organization for entrepreneurs. And the two of them teamed up to write this book. It's like a lot of business books, it could probably be about a half as long as it is. But the how they talk about it, I think, is very, very helpful. And it's been really transformative for a couple of my clients.
I love Gino Wickman, love EOS.
Yeah.
Rocket Fuel could have been 12 pages long. I was like,
yeah.
Love it. I suggest it because I think the relationship between visionary and integrator is critical.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. There's, I've been saying for a long time, prioritize for me. I think the one key thing, and I want to bring it back to kind of like that final moment of where I come from and where I bring my military background is when I left the military, when I joined the military, it's all I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to do. And when I had to leave, it was the saddest part of my life. There's other sad, but for me personally, it was, oh my God, back then, this is the only thing that I've dreamed about doing.
Yeah.
And now I have to leave it. And this very good master warrant officer told me, he's like, Martin, there's 3 things important in life. Okay. He says, 1, your physical and mental health. That's number 1. You can't help anybody else if you're not fit, both in body and mind. I said, okay, good. He said, family and friends. He says, family is thicker than blood. Think about that for a second. You've been in the military. You've created your military family, and family will always be thicker than blood. And he said, 3rd thing, every fucking thing else after that. And so, so I was like, at first I was like, okay, I get you. But now that I'm of wiser age, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings it full circle about getting your shit together. It's like, think about you first. And not in a selfish, we see selfish as this bad thing, but selfish just means self-care. Just think of you first. Doesn't mean that you're forgetting everybody else. It's saying, if I'm not fit, then how can I lead? How can I be a better person? How can I help others if I'm not finely tuned?
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Hallelujah. What an intense conversation.
Oh.
Miss Kasey Jones, thank you so very much for being on the show. It was such a delightful conversation.
Delightful? No, it really was delightful. And it was fantastic. I knew this would be a good one. Our first conversation, I was like, damn, I could talk to this guy like literally all day long, and it's always interesting. So I was really looking forward to this. I appreciate you being open to me getting into some real stuff. I'm coming up on this 2-year anniversary, so I've been really, really thinking about things a lot. And like I said, it is helpful to talk. It's helpful to talk about things. You learn things every time, and today was definitely no different. So I really appreciate it. Okay.
With that being said, my name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategies into frontline operations. I was thinking about what the next thing I had to say, which is I'm just this poor marketer. Please like, subscribe, click the notification bell, whatever it takes, just please follow me. Please. No, just kidding. If you enjoy the show, just let us know. All right. With that being said, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to What CEOs Talk About. Make sure to click subscribe to get notified about future episodes, or check us out at www.whatceostalkabout.com.